Vampire's Kiss is a psychological black comedy that was released on June 2nd, 1989. This film has made quite the rounds on the internet with its meme-driven fanbase due to Nicolas Cage's over-the-top insanity. But what if I told you that this film is more than just a memified comedy movie? A movie centered around the deteriorating mental health of the common yuppie. This isn't just a vampire flick, it's a movie about self-realization, and that in and of itself can be scary. Directed by Robert Bierman, this film came to life through various locations across New York City. It stars the one and only Nicolas Cage, which was almost a loss as Cage's agent said he needed to do something a bit more sophisticated. That's when they brought in Judd Nelson as his replacement. However, Cage decided to return in what I would claim is nothing more than providential. This story begins with the typical overworked and narcissistic office man named Peter Loew, who brings home a woman named Jackie for a one-night stand. However, a bat literally interferes with their fun.
Just relax.
Alright.
Shoot! Shoot!
Shoot.
Shoot!
This brought upon uncontrollable laughter by both of them. Puzzled yet? Well, this is only the beginning. Peter relishes in power and the typical boss mentality. He loves to terrorize his assistant Alva, which is a big focal point in Cage's descent into madness. Aside from maybe his hair, which has a personality of its own, Cage's unique performance is what carries most of the film with what is easily best defined as chaotic. In this movie, Peter Loew is drawn to the chaos, and this is masterfully outdone by an over-the-top performance by Cage himself. One thing's for sure, Peter needed Cage as much as Cage needed Peter. This tour de force of unhinged madness kicked off Cage's career as a method actor. He was already an established actor, but this role gave him a safe space to heighten the madness. As for Peter, who else is going to shout,
Am I getting through to you? Alva!
Not Judd Nelson, that's for sure. Every vampiric gesture toes the line between absurdity and tragedy. This often confuses the audience and begs the question, is this a comedy? Is it horror? Well, to me it is a character study film that embellishes many elements. Everything in this analysis today circles back to Peter and how he reacts to his own behaviors. It may not make sense at first, but for thematical reasons, you can find similarities to movies like Maniac and American Psycho. Underneath all of the insanity in this film, there's a man that cannot face what he's actually become. Now, the key goal is to define what fear of self means and how it relates in this context. Fear of self is not so much a spectrum, but an extensive concept alongside various anxieties. We can start to put the puzzle pieces together with several traits from Peter himself. First and foremost, at the core of his archetype, he's a self-absorbed yuppie. He has a very active nightlife, frequenting elite clubs. He loves to party, has a very high-status corporate job in publishing, and his relationships are incredibly shallow, mainly consisting of one-night stands as a form of escapism. Essentially, Peter prefers his career in instant gratification over an emotional connection. This goes into how he treats women, eventually standing Jackie up for a deep fantasy involving Rachel, a mysterious and overtly beautiful fantasy woman. This is because Peter is afraid of commitment, which means being honest with Jackie about who he is would require emotional responsibility, whereas Rachel is seductive, otherworldly, and feeds into his narcissistic ego, which is an easy option for escapism. However, this sets Peter up for disaster, since his fantasy involves a dangerous bite to his neck. Anytime something goes wrong in Peter's life, he chooses to blame Rachel, who he believes turned him into the monster he is now. But the truth is, Rachel doesn't exist as an external villain. Rachel is someone who lives inside of Peter. This is where Peter truly descends into madness, as he believes he is becoming something unimaginable instead of facing his true self. This is an easy option for Peter, as he doesn't want to accept accountability for who he is as a person. He prefers to choose self-hatred, but even that's hard to admit. Essentially, he becomes obsessed with being a vampire. That's because for Peter Loew, he has an immense fear that beneath his grandiose facade, he's nothing more than a flawed, valueless, and ego-driven man covering up his own fragility. As we continue to see Peter's descent into madness, we can see that his own narcissism consumes him.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. That's all you have to do.
Now is a great opportunity to break down Peter's mannerisms visually. I'm going to show you each key scene that showcases Peter's behavior. These are the components in shaping him as a narcissist that's slowly detaching themselves from reality. Once again, we can start from the beginning with the bat scene. Peter gets attacked by a bat as the beginning cursor to his loss of self-control. This happened as a warning sign because for Peter, he isn't allowing himself to have formidable intimacy as he is afraid. Instead, he has to create such an absurd dynamic to escape. Peter often finds himself staring off at people, typically couples that he scoffs at. Seeing genuine connection triggers his fear of inferiority. A happy relationship takes the focus off of him, as Peter feels the world he lives in must center him. We can also use his cruelty towards Alva as probably the biggest example out of all of his behaviors. Peter resents women because of his insecurities, so he chooses not to address this while channeling his frustration towards his secretary. He acknowledges that Alva is in a vulnerable position and takes full advantage of this by reminding her that he will fire her if she doesn't do what he says.
That's right, Alva. It's a horrible, horrible job. Sifting through old contract after old contract. I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to. And you have to do it. You have to, or I'll fire you. Do you understand?
Essentially, he targets Alva because she's not the same imaginary woman that treats him special. Not only that, but Peter also views her as the bottom of the food chain within the company, meaning he can use her, as it was never about the business, but his own personal vendettas. This is an important pointer because it once again shows Peter's detachment from reality. It's also safe to point out that similar to the likes of Patrick Bateman, being an executive has turned him into a monster. There's a certain point where we begin to see Peter truly losing his grip on reality. He walks into work with a band-aid across his neck and sunglasses. This is important because Peter loves to create a facade. The sunglasses have nothing to do with the idea that vampires are afraid of the sun. The sunglasses is an example of Peter's social isolation. He's disconnected from his co-workers, friends, and he's losing grip on himself. Furthermore, sunglasses can be a mask he's trying to hide under, as he can project a false narrative of sophistication, when deep down, he's lost. Next, while Peter is alone in his apartment, we finally start to see a more visual example of his psychological breakdown. In an unhinged manner, he eats a cockroach in his apartment. Disgusting. This is where audience reaction jumps between disturbing and absurdly humorous. Additionally, the scene where he attempts to look at himself in the mirror, but believes nothing is there. This signifies that Peter cannot self-reflect. Quite frankly, he would rather have an absence of self than face his true self. Deep down, he believes he is a human with no soul. Now we can acknowledge that Peter is becoming alienated from society. This interaction with the mirror sends Peter over the edge. We've traced Peter's timeline from loneliness to delusion and now violence. We already know that Peter inhabits a reality of his own making, prioritizing grandiosity and fantasy over the real world. Peter has grown more uninhabitable. He can no longer control himself as his delusions have consumed him. He is overcome with psychosis, concluding with a vengeful attack towards Alva. This is proof that he has no control over himself or his environment. He's no longer there. One thing to acknowledge, while Peter is attacking Alva, he hallucinates that she's Rachel, his fantasy delusion. He needs women to be a picture-perfect idealization, even if he's there to hurt them. Peter has fully lost control over social norms. He goes into a convenience store to purchase some plastic fangs, signifying that he can no longer live with himself. It's as if he's traded in the sunglasses he hid behind and is fully embracing a monstrous identity. Peter eventually finds himself in a club where he's covered in blood after attacking a woman on the couch. We get one last interaction with his fantasy woman, Rachel, who finally rejects him as he makes one last attempt at recapturing the feelings she gave him. This shatters Peter's carefully crafted world where he sees himself as powerful and desirable. Even the figment person he's crafted through imagination finds out the truth about himself. Peter can no longer escape in fantasy as it fades into his reality. Peter's ultimate climax is when he's seen staggering around outside, eyes completely glazed over. He hallucinates that he's in his therapist's office. Peter sees himself as composed, but it's clear that he's erratic, maniacal, and hardly contained. This scene is the tipping point as he unravels his emotional wrongdoings in front of a brand new fantasy woman, all while his mental collapse reaches its peak. Neither his therapist, nor this newfound woman he's created, sees this as problematic, as it's his way of fitting imagination into his grandiose fantasy. See, Peter doesn't just want love, he wants perfect love that caters to his ego. However, this perfect woman in the end is a misunderstanding, as he quickly begins arguing with her. This is Peter's ultimate truth, that even when he has everything that he wants, he will lose even in fantasy just like he did with Rachel. Peter can no longer accept himself. In a fit of rage in his apartment and unbeknownst to him, he is attacked by Alva's brother, who is there to seek revenge for what he did to her. Now, Peter has finally accepted the monster that he's become. In a full-fledged vampire fit, he realizes that demise through death is his only escape, and sets up his own suicide by proxy.
Like this, and I'll take it in the cross, the crucifix, me vampire! Vampire, you idiot, Nosferatu! Christ! The tortures of the damned!
Vampirism was an easy escape for Peter because just like Dracula, who feeds off people for survival, Peter drains people emotionally in order to achieve validation and admiration. Vampires often take from others without regard of boundaries or their well-being. Peter may have chosen something unimaginable as a way to believe his real self is also a fallacy. In conclusion, Peter accepts death as an escape because his fantasies have destroyed his identity. He is completely alienated from people, he can't bear the weight of his own actions, and he has total loss of control. As we have seen, this became scary because Peter no longer separated his vampire delusions from reality. As his actions escalated, it no longer persisted as a fear he was trying to escape from, but full-on exceptionalism, turning his delusions into physical manifestations. This film, in a nutshell, is not just a flick for so bad it's good movie night, but a man who is terrified of becoming a monster, inevitably realizing he always was one. Thank you all for watching. Hit like, subscribe, and comment, and I really hope you enjoyed it.